Have you ever felt a sudden fear, like someone's watching you, or strange things are happening around your home? What if I told you, sometimes these fears are not just coincidences, but spiritual tests from Allah? Witches, black magic and evil forces, they may sound like stories, but in Islam, they're very real. Yet here's what most people forget. Their power is nothing compared to the power of Allah. The Prophet taught us that even if the entire world gathered to harm you, they could never do so unless Allah willed it. That means your greatest shield isn't fear, it's faith. In this reminder, we'll uncover how fear can become your greatest weakness or your strongest weapon, depending on who you put your trust in. Stay till the end, because once you understand the truth, you never fear darkness again. Only the one who controls it, Allah Almighty. Black magic, known in Arabic as Sihr, is a dark and forbidden practice that has existed since ancient times. In Islam, its reality is undeniable. Allah Himself mentions it in the Qur'an, revealing that Sihr was taught by devils during the time of Prophet Sulaiman Likhlelhem. However, Sulaiman did not disbelieve. The devils did by teaching people what would harm them and separate loved ones. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:10-2. This verse alone confirms that black magic is real, not superstition. It operates through the help of shayateen, evil jinn, who respond to the commands of magicians and witches in exchange for acts of disbelief. These acts often include insults to the Qur'an, acts of impurity and worship directed away from Allah. In return, the magician gains limited and temporary control over unseen forces, but at the cost of his soul and faith. Sihr can manifest in many forms: physical illness without medical explanation, emotional breakdowns, broken relationships, or sudden loss of peace and success. However, it's vital to remember that no spell, curse, or evil act can harm a believer without Allah's permission. Allah says they could not harm anyone except by the will of Allah. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:10-2. Islam forbids seeking help from magicians or fortune tellers. The Prophet said, "Whoever goes to a fortune teller and believes what he says has disbelieved in what was revealed to Muhammad." Such actions destroy one's faith because they rely on creation instead of the Creator. Understanding Sihr helps a believer recognize its danger, not to live in fear, but to strengthen protection through faith. The Quran, adhar, and righteous living are the greatest shields against all evil. True believers know that black magic is powerless before the light of Tawheed and trust in Allah. When your heart stays firm in remembrance, no darkness can ever overcome you. In the dark world of witchcraft and sorcery, nothing happens without the involvement of jinn, unseen beings created by Allah from smokeless fire. When witches or magicians attempt to perform sihr, black magic, they first seek permission and assistance from these jinn. Islam teaches that such dealings are strictly forbidden, as they require committing acts of shirk, associating partners with Allah in exchange for worldly gain or supernatural control. The jinn do not help freely. They demand worship, obedience, or sinful actions that insult Allah and His sacred teachings. To gain their cooperation, witches often perform disturbing rituals, reciting Qur'anic verses backward, stepping on the mushaf, spilling blood, or making offerings in filthy places. These are not random acts of evil, they are forms of allegiance to shayateen, devilish jinn, who then agree to carry out the magician's requests. Through this unholy pact, the witch becomes a servant to the jinn. The jinn in turn use their abilities to whisper, deceive, and harm the person targeted by the spell. They might cause nightmares, anxiety, illness, or even division between loved ones. This alliance is mentioned in the Qur'an. And there were men from mankind who sought refuge in men from the jinn, so they only increased them in mischief. Surah Al-Jinn 72:6. This verse clearly exposes the reality. When humans depend on jinn, they invite destruction, not help. The jinn may seem to serve at first, but they always aim to mislead humans into disbelief. What begins as a deal for power ends as a chain of spiritual slavery. Witches believe they are in control, but in truth, they are the controlled. The moment they seek assistance from Jinn, they lose Allah's protection and invite His wrath. Islam reminds us that no power exists outside Allah's will. The only true protection is through faith, remembrance, Dhikr, and the Quran, not through forbidden pacts with the unseen. A heart connected to Allah needs no jinn, for He alone controls all creation, both seen and unseen. Before a witch or magician can cast a spell, they must gather information about the intended victim, and the process they use is both disturbing and spiritually dangerous. These questions are not ordinary inquiries. They are designed to create a spiritual connection between the victim and the jinn who will carry out the harm. In Islamic understanding, knowledge of a person's name, family, and personal details can be used as a key by the unseen forces of darkness to locate and affect that individual. Witches often ask for the victim's full name, mother's name, and sometimes even a photograph or piece of clothing. Why the mother's name? Because jinn track individuals through maternal lineage. It reveals spiritual identification rather than worldly identity. With that detail, the jinn can easily find the victim among millions of souls. The witch may also ask for birth dates, hair strands, or nail clippings, which are used in dark rituals to form a spiritual link to the target's energy. These details are then offered to the jinn through a pact or ritual. The witch might recite distorted words, perform chants, or burn the items while invoking the jinn's power. In return, the jinn receive authority to influence the victim's emotions, health, or relationships. They may cause constant arguments, fear, sleeplessness, or even blockages in rizq. The Prophet warned about such practices, saying, "Whoever goes to a soothsayer or a fortune teller and believes in what they say has disbelieved in what was revealed to Muhammad." Ahmad. This hadith reveals the gravity of such acts. Even consulting such people endangers one's faith. The witches' questions, though they may seem simple, are actually a spiritual trap. Once answered, they give permission for the jinn to act. Islam teaches us that true believers should never fear black magic, but should seek protection through Qur'anic recitation, especially Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayat Al-Kursi, and the Mu'awwidhatayn, Surah Al-Falaq and An-Na'as. These verses are divine shields that cut off any dark connection made through such rituals. When witches ask about the victim, it's not curiosity, it's corruption. They are not asking to know, but to harm. The wise believer stays guarded, remembering that no question of darkness can ever overcome the light of Tawheed, the oneness and protection of Allah. And answering the questions of witches, fortune tellers, or those who deal with jinn may seem harmless to some, but in reality, it opens the door to deep spiritual damage. In Islam, such interactions are not just discouraged, they are strictly forbidden, because they break the believer's spiritual shield and weaken their connection with Allah. Every time a person responds to these dark inquiries, they unknowingly give permission for the unseen forces to interfere in their life. When someone answers questions like their full name, mother's name, or personal details, they are handing over spiritual keys that can be used to locate and influence their soul's energy. The jinn who work alongside the witch use this information to attach themselves to the victim's environment, emotions, and even dreams. Slowly, this leads to a feeling of heaviness in the heart, constant fatigue, fear, confusion, and sudden anger or sadness without reason. These are not random emotions. They are signs that the person's spiritual aura has been penetrated. The Quran warns believers not to seek help from the unseen forces of darkness. Allah says, "And there were men from mankind who sought refuge in men from the jinn, so they increased them in burden." Surah Al-Jinn 72:6. This verse reveals the spiritual consequence of such actions. When humans turn to jinn or answer their calls, they lose divine protection and gain spiritual heaviness instead. The heart that was once filled with nur, light, begins to darken with whispers and doubts. Over time, one may lose motivation for prayer, struggle to recite Qur'an or even feel distant from Allah without understanding why. Answering these questions also signifies a breach of Tawheed, belief in the oneness of Allah, because it implies trust in sources other than Him. The Prophet said, "Whoever goes to a soothsayer or a fortune teller and believes what he says, has disbelieved in what was revealed to Muhammad, Ahmad." True believers protect their peace by refusing to answer, listen, or interact with anyone who seeks such details for dark purposes. Instead, they strengthen themselves with Dhikr, remembrance of Allah, Surah Al-Baqarah and Ayat Al-Kursi, which block any attempt of spiritual harm. In short, the moment you answer a witch's question, you give them a thread to pull, but the moment you turn to Allah, you cut that thread forever. Islam provides a powerful and complete way to protect oneself from sihr, black magic, not through fear or superstition, but through faith, remembrance, and reliance on Allah alone. Sihr is real and dangerous, but it has no power except by Allah's permission. The Qur'an reminds us, they might not harm anyone except by Allah's leave. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:10-2. This verse establishes the foundation of protection, complete tawakkul, trust in Allah. The first and most essential defense is to strengthen your relationship with Him through regular prayer, salah, and daily Qur'an recitation. A heart connected to Allah cannot easily be shaken by dark forces. Missing prayers or neglecting dhikr leaves spiritual doors open, while prayer seals them with divine light. The Prophet Muhammad taught specific verses and actions that act as divine shields. Reciting Surah Al-Baqarah regularly is among the most powerful protections. The Prophet said, "Do not make your houses like graves. Indeed, shaitan flees from the house in which Surah Al-Baqarah is recited." Other essential verses include Ayat Al-Kursi 225:5, the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Al-Ikhlas, Al-Falaq, and An-Nas, known as the Mu'awwidhatain, or verses of refuge. These should be recited morning and evening and before sleeping. They act like a spiritual force field, guarding one's heart, mind, and home from evil influences. Additionally, Ruqyah Sharia, or spiritual healing through Qur'anic recitation and supplication, is an authentic sunnah practice. This involves reading specific verses and du'as over oneself or others with pure intention and faith. Importantly, Islam strictly forbids visiting magicians, fortune tellers, or anyone claiming to use Jinn for help, as such acts bring greater harm and displease Allah. Maintaining cleanliness, especially through wudu, is another form of unseen protection. Purity repels evil, while negligence invites spiritual dirt. Keeping your home filled with dhikr, Quran recitation, and avoiding haram media also creates an atmosphere of light that evil cannot penetrate. Lastly, believers should make dua for protection, such as Bismillah al-addoru ma asmihi shi'un fi ardi wala fi as-samai wa huwa as-shami' al. In the name of Allah, with whose name nothing on earth or in the heavens can harm, and He is the all-hearing, all-knowing. In essence, the Islamic way to protect yourself from sihr is not about fear, it's about faith. When your home, heart, and tongue are filled with the remembrance of Allah, no darkness can remain. Fear is a natural human emotion. It reminds us of our vulnerability and dependence. But when fear begins to dominate our hearts, especially fear of unseen forces like jinn, sihr, black magic, or misfortune, Islam gently redirects that emotion towards something higher. Faith in Allah's supreme power. True faith transforms fear into strength, because a believer knows that nothing happens without Allah's will. The Quran repeatedly reminds us that Allah is the ultimate protector and controller of all things. And never will we be struck except by what Allah has decreed for us. He is our protector. Surah At-Tawbah 9:51. This verse teaches us that no magician, no evil eye, and no force of darkness can harm a person unless Allah allows it, And if Allah allows it, it's not for destruction, but for purification and elevation. Fear then becomes a call to return to Allah, to renew our faith and to strengthen our trust. Tawakkul. When someone truly believes in Allah's qadr, divine decree, fear loses its grip. You stop worrying about what others can do to you and start focusing on what Allah can do for you. That is the heart of Iman, faith, knowing that protection, healing and peace come only from Him. The Prophet said, "Be mindful of Allah and He will protect you. Be mindful of Allah and you will find Him before you." Tirmidhi. This beautiful hadith reminds us that divine protection is not about charms or rituals, it's about living in remembrance of Allah. The more dhikr remembrance you do, the more your heart becomes a fortress of faith where no fear can reside. Fear often thrives where ignorance exists, but when a believer learns Allah's names, Al-Hafiz, the protector, Al-Gawidi, the all-powerful, Al-Latif, the subtle, they realize that the one who controls both light and darkness is the same one watching over them with mercy. So when you feel afraid, don't let it weaken your heart. Let it push you to the prayer mat. Say, Hasbun Allahu wa me'um al-abmu'elle. Allah is sufficient for us and He is the best disposer of affairs. Because once your heart rests in Allah's power, fear no longer controls you, faith does.